Good night. Welcome once again, friends. Tonight's topic, um, in the days of Lot. Tonight's topic, in the days of Lot, and I have quite a bit of notes, quite a bit of quite a bit of readings. So I'm gonna move through as quickly as I possibly can. I pray you may be able to follow, or you can always replay the video. Okay. Um, in the days of Lot. But before we delve into the topic, I want to start by saying most of the Bible is addressing or warning God's people that were literal Israel. Therefore, most of the Bible is addressing or warning spiritual Israel, God's covenant people, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And the lesser portion is warning the world. Okay. I have my Bible right here, King James Version. Let's read Luke 17. Luke 17, verses 26 through to 28. Luke 17. Okay. 26 through to 28. And I read, "And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all." 28. "Likewise also as it was in the days of Lot. They did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded." Okay. In a previous presentation, I discussed what went on in the days of Noah, leading up to the flood, and drew parallels of what will and is taking place in our history, leading up to the second coming of Christ. Now let's do the same with the history of Lot. Let's now turn to Genesis chapter 18, and I'm going to be reading a few verses. Genesis 18, chapter 13. Okay. Verse 1. Or you know what? No, I'm going to start at verse 2. And I read, "And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground." Okay, so this is Abraham who ran to meet the 3 men and bowed himself toward the ground. And these 3 men were actually angels, Christ being one of them. But as we read on, it will become more clear. Okay, so that was verse 2. Here we see 3 angels, which parallels the 3 angels' messages in our history. First, in the Millerites' history from 1798 through to 1844, the history of Revelation 14, verses 6 through 12, and repeats in our history the final generation, Revelation 18, verses 1 through 8, the antitype and the perfect fulfillment of Revelation 14, verse 6 through 12. These 3 angels in Genesis 18, verse 2, brought messages to Abraham and his wife. Message about the promised seed, and message about the destruction, also message about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Parallel to our history, fast forward to our history, the message of the second coming of Christ, parallel, and the impending destruction of the world. I read on, and as I read, it will become more clear. We're going to jump now. That was verse 2, so I'm going to jump down now to verse 4. And I read, Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Verse 5, And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do as thou hast said. So these angels now, Abraham invited them in, and they took the offer. Okay, jumping down now to verse 10. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah my wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. So see, they're giving both of them the message. This was Abraham actually right here first, but they brought the message of the promised seed. Okay. Verse 11. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Verse 12. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? Sarah laughing represents those in our history who will have doubts about the nearness of the second coming of Christ, and will mock and jeer those who are preaching the three angels' messages. Okay, moving along, jumping down to verse 16, and I read, And the men rose up from thence, and looked toward Sodom, and Abram went with them to bring them on the way. Verse 17, they delivered the message. Now they're moving along. As I said, two messages they brought: the promised seed and the destruction of Sodom, paralleling in our time the nearness of Christ and also the destruction of the world. Okay, so verse 17 rather. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abram that thing which I do? Okay, so the Lord here is Christ, as I said. He was one of the angels, and he remained with Abraham, whilst the other two went forward. They go forth to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. Verse 18, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Okay, jump down to verse 20. And the Lord said, Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is grievous. 21, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. Okay, so verse 21 says to go down and see. This is to investigate the time of their visitation. Sodom and Gomorrah's visitation, their investigation. They were being investigated whilst they were alive. The investigation of the living. And we, our history, we are presently in that history now. We are presently God's covenant people are being investigated. The Seventh-day Adventist Church. Judgment must begin first at the house of God. 1 Peter 4 verse 17. Our probation will close at the Sunday law crisis. Then the other flock that will follow the voice of the Lamb and come out of Babylon and out of the fallen churches, fulfilling Revelation 18 verse 4, will be investigated next until, not forever, until Daniel 12 verse 1, when Michael stands up, which means the close of human probation, and then the fallen or and the falling of the seven last plagues. Okay, so now let's go over to chapter 19. Chapter 19, verse 1. And I read, And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And seeing Lot in the gate of Sodom, and Lot seeing them rather, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. Here Lot also greet them by bowing his face down to the ground. Okay. Here we also see the two angels present at Sodom. They are now at Sodom, and the verse also identifies them, the two men, as angels, as I was explaining before. Okay. I'm going to jump down to verse 5. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men? Okay, so these are the villagers, in my terms, those who saw the two angels that came, and Lot greeted them and invited them in. So the villagers saw these two angels and they came to inquire. I read on, verse 5. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Okay. We may know them. Remember those words. But this we may know them doesn't simply mean to become acquainted in a friendly manner. This is referring to homosexuality. Fast forward to our history, the LGBT lifestyle in the church of the Seventh-day Adventists. This is not referring to the LGBT lifestyle in the world, because remember, the majority of the writings is addressing God's people. I read on. I continue to explain. God here is talking to his church, or about his church. Okay, to prove that, to know them, going back to that, so we may know them, to prove that to know them is referring to homosexuality. All who have a King James Version Bible will see below verse 5 on the right hand a second scripture, which is a second witness, giving a little more details of the verse. So all those who have a King James Version Bible, just below verse 5 at the right hand corner, verse 5, you see a second witness scripture, which is Romans 1 verses 24 and 27. Romans 1 verses 24 and 27. And I'm going to read, which gives us more proof that this is homosexuality. Romans 1 24, 27. 24. Wherefore God also gave up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. 27. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meet. So I pray that that was clear. That's referring to know them. That is referring to homosexuality, the LGBT lifestyle, which we see in, not in the world, not in the fallen churches, but that is prevalent now in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is what God was addressing and is addressing. Okay, so that was verse 5. Verse 6. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him. The angels were inside. Okay, so the angels were inside. The angels were inside the house, and those the angels were inside the house, and those outside rejected the angels. The shut door means they closed their probation due to the rejection of the angels. Fast forward to our history. The General Conference churches no longer preaches the three angels' messages. They have shut them out. Hence, they are presently closing their probation. These on the inside represent the self-supported churches that still preaches the three angels' messages. And most importantly, the General Conference churches are in agreement with the LGBT lifestyle. I continue reading. Verse 9. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow, referring to Lot, because now they want to break in. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came into sojourn, and he will need to be a judge, referring to Lot. Nor will we deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. They rejected the three angels' messages. Verse 10. But the men put forth their hand, the angels, and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut the door. The close of probation. The antitype in our history is the Sunday law, which is the close of probation for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, not the world. Verse 11. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. That are those who were on the outside, wanted to go in. Okay, so those who rejected the three angels' message, or the three angels, went out into further darkness. Those who rejected the three angels' messages, they went into further darkness / blindness. Both small, they received the mark of the beast. I beg your pardon for that intermission. They received the mark of the beast. Verse 12. And the men said unto Lot, hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. This is after the close of probation. So, verse 12 represents the call now, which goes to the other flock. Let's jump down now to verse 14. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. Many will mock and persecute the saints. Verse 15. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. Okay, so the angels hastened Lot represents the loud cry of the third angel's message, followed by the other voice that says, come out of her, my people. Revelation 18, verse 4. Let's go to verse 17. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. Okay, verse 17. Pause for a minute. I'm going to discuss verse 17 before we move on. A part of the loud cry of the third angel's message is to get out of the cities, because the cities are going to be destroyed. The popular cities are going to be destroyed first because of the abundance of sin in these places. God's people should now find themselves in the rural areas where they can plant their crops to feed themselves, because also a time is coming, and that is very soon, where we won't be able to buy nor sell, except those who have received the mark of the beast, those who accept the papal false Sabbath, which is Sunday. Also, during the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, second witness, which is a type of destruction of the world, many also fled to the mountains, the countryside, for our time. Matthew 24, verse 16 through to 18. And let me read. Matthew 24, verses 16 through to 18. And I read, Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. So you see, it says flee to the mountain. Second witness, that would happen at the end of the world, because the destruction of Jerusalem is that type of the destruction that would happen on the entire world. Okay, so that was verse 17. So Lot and his family represents those who will flee to the country, even now. Those who can. For those who can afford it, before the storm, which is the Sunday law. The spirit of prophecy, which is also the inspired word of God, also tells us to get out of the cities. The writings, selected messages for those who have these books, or we can Google them. You can Google them if you want. Selected Messages, Book 2, pages 356 and 357, 1903 edition. I don't think it matters much, but this was a 1903 edition. Also, manuscript release 1518, manuscript release 1518, May 10th, 1906. Okay, moving along. Let's go now to verse 26. And I read in Genesis 19, But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Lot's wife represents the General Conference churches of the Seventh-day Adventists, who returns to Babylon. The brimstone and fire that rained from heaven upon Sodom and Gomorrah represents the 7 last plagues. Let's read verses 24 and 25. And I read, Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. 25. And he overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground, typify the destruction of the world. So it was in the days of Lot, so it shall be in the end times, in the era now, I should say. All that has happened will happen and will be repeated. So these were the steps leading up LGBT lifestyle in the church. And as I said, we're not talking about the fallen churches. We're talking about the Seventh-day Adventist church, God's covenant people. So we see all this leading up. Fleeing to the mountain. Those who, which is going to the country. That's a part of the message. The nearness of Christ coming, which will be mocked, because our leaders say there's no Sunday law in the pipeline. What have I overlooked? The 3 angels were rejected. So those who rejected the 3 angels' message, they were also rejected. They closed their own probation. And the house, which also represents a church, Lot's house, where the 3 angels, or the 2 angels rather, were, they were saved. Lots of parallels. A lot of parallels, my friends, for those who are Seventh-day Adventists, and I pray that those who are even not Seventh-day Adventists was able to follow, or were able to follow. Okay, friends, that's it for now. All that took place in the days of Lot are repeated, as I said, and will be repeated for all those who are willing to see. I pray that someone received the light on this topic for tonight. But if not, take it to the Lord in prayer. Don't forget to like and share the video with a friend. You may also leave a comment at the bottom. Okay.